Good morning. My name is Josie LaForte, and I'm going to be a senior at Hall High School this year. I was asked to speak here today due to my unique position of living with two educators. My mom, a first grade teacher at Morley, and my dad, an earth science teacher at Hall. Years of eavesdropping on my parents' late night conversations has indeed enlightened me about some of the more unbelievable aspects of your profession. For instance, my mom once came home from East Hall Summer School with big news. Brace yourselves. According to one of her second graders, the Illuminati killed Michael Jackson. And I learned from my dad that if your lectures on tectonic plate structure are too boring, as his apparently are, they may actually drive certain students to sprint out of the back door of your portable to go chase geese in the pouring rain. Also, I know from another story that those no eating in the classroom rules can be pretty tricky. It may actually prompt an irate student to chuck his bologna sandwich right at your head. Although if you look at the glass half full, no food will be wasted because another kid will probably pop out of his seat and salvage it right off the floor. And yes, that really happened. I've come to understand how brutally honest kids can be too. All in the name of being helpful, of course. One time, for instance, a girl politely interrupted my mom's read aloud just to tell her that she had, quote, wrinkles under her eyes like old person. As for my dad, he has been informed on more than one occasion that his arms are hairy, quote, like an ape. So, these stories and more have given me a window into what the job is really like. But what makes teachers so unique? My parents really and truly love what they do, as I'm sure do all of you. But why? What makes you as a group so special? As I thought a lot about this as I sat down to write this speech. I ultimately didn't come to a final answer from having two teachers for parents, but through rereading a speech by author David Foster Wallace that we discussed in AP Lang last year. He describes us as human beings having what he calls a default setting. For those of you unfamiliar with this, it's basically what we think about when we aren't thinking about anything in particular. It's that little voice in your head that narrates your thoughts to you. And many of us, he explains, subconsciously go around believing that the world revolves around us. For instance, when you're late to work and someone cuts you off, that mini you in your head flips up the middle finger and tells that person to F off because they've almost wrecked your car. But, as Foster says, in reality, that person could have a sick child in the car and they were on the way to the hospital, and you were in fact in their way and they cut you off for the sake of protecting their child, as any parent would have done. And no, the conclusion I came to was not that you all go around swearing at each other in your free time. The fact is, teachers have a different narrator. You dedicate your life to helping kids like me succeed. Your narrator does not revolve around you. It revolves around others. And this, of course, is only a small fraction of what makes you all so unique, but I believe it's one of the most important parts. I want to sincerely say thank you, not just for the hours you spend in and out of the classroom, but because you are all teachers all the time. And in the few spare moments when you aren't teaching, you're most likely coaching basketball or track, or tutoring us for the SAT, or downing espresso shots at midnight to polish off that last college recommendation. Or you're at Big Y conducting an incredibly awkward impromptu parent conference. I am also aware of the fact that, even though it's my first time speaking in front of you, this convocation meeting happens every year and probably includes the message that you are teaching the future and maybe some days are going to be harder than others, but it's all worth it in the end. I won't repeat all of that, but I will say that someday, after this whole state budget thing is all worked out and you've all since retired to Martha's Vineyard, one of your former students will be sitting on the floor of their attic with an old dusty yearbook balanced on their lap, looking at a page with your face on it, and they'll be reminiscing of you, their favorite teacher. They'll remind themselves that you were the early interventionist who first got them excited about books, or the track coach who pushed them up the shearing pain of sprinting up that final hill. And in that moment, they'll recall just how instrumental you were to supporting them along their path. Maybe they'll finally make the realization that it wasn't outdoor recess snowball fights or the soft-baked cafeteria cookies that made school so memorable. It was you, the teacher whose energy from August through June was solely focused on preparing them for the future. And maybe after this realization, that former student will change for the better. And the narrator in their head will shift a little more to be like yours, the one that was and still is so incredibly focused on inspiring, encouraging, and leading West Hartford students year after year. Thank you.
Well done, Josie. Your achievements and your insights are a testament to your hard work and the effort of your parents and all that is good in West Hartford. Thank you. The late Wayne Dyer spoke about choosing a career path. He believed that there's no scarcity of opportunity to make a living at what you love. There's only the scarcity of resolve to make it happen. Just as we recognize the benefit of bringing new members into our team, we also recognize strength and balance. And I want to acknowledge the members of our professional staff who possess that resolve and have reached career milestones. In his book, Light in the Heart, Roy T. Bennett reminds us that the level of success you achieve will be in direct proportion to the depth of your commitment. Those of you who have made West Hartford home for your careers are the framework on which this district's success is built. I would like to take this time to recognize those teachers whose depth of experience, commitment, and resolve are the cornerstones of our community. Can I please ask those colleagues who have reached between 25 and 29 years of service to stand and be recognized? Stay standing. Okay, please remain standing. And for those of you who have 30 to 34 years of service, would you please join them? Will anyone with 35 or more years of service please stand? We recognize and celebrate your accomplishments and are inspired by your resolve and your commitment. Thank you. I am now pleased to call on our 2016-2017 Teacher of the Year, Steve O'Brien, 5th grade teacher at Aken Elementary School. He will be introducing our next West Hartford Teacher of the Year. Steve has represented West Hartford with distinction and symbolizes the best in our schools. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Steve O'Brien.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to thank my Aken family, you, my district colleagues, and the town of West Hartford for allowing me to represent the school district for the 2016-2017 school year. Thank you. I've met with amazing people, taken part in some fun times, been given a chance to grow even more as a professional, and spent untold hours on professional development. This is all what we call in the trade a typical year in the West Hartford Public Schools. But today, we are delighted to honor Luis Ramirez. I met with Luis in the spring and one thing immediately became clear. Here's a man who cares not only about the whole child, but the child's family as well. The child of Cuban immigrants, Lewis loves to talk about the respect for family and appreciation for education he gained while growing up. He glows when talking about how he met his lovely wife, Laura, spending time with his two wonderful children, Grace and Cooper, and coaching his son's soccer team. In speaking with his colleagues, certain phrases come up over and over again, such as courageous composure, incredible humility, gentle but firm manner, and wonderful sense of humor. Students in need or parents frozen with fear at coming in for a PPT are soothed and reassured by Lewis's warm smile and gentle professionalism. It's easy to see how he seamlessly meshes his love for family with his work with the students and their families at Smith School. For the description that says it all, I turn to the words of Teresa Giolito, principal of Smith School. Many of the families that Lewis works with are in a state of crisis and/or emotional distress. Lewis offers the families of Smith a caring, understanding, and empowering environment where they feel trusted. His work with complex cases involves many different parties with disparate goals. He recognizes that change does not happen overnight. He's a highly dedicated professional who thinks critically and creatively to effectively problem solve with students and their families. Wow, that says it all about the man. And then she sums it up perfectly. Lewis is the glue that holds our school together. We are indeed honored and grateful to have such a compassionate and dedicated colleague. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the West Hartford Teacher of the Year for 2017-2018, Lewis Ramirez.
Thank you so much. For those of you who couldn't see what I just saw, my awesome crew down there, they had a bunch of my big faces on sticks over here. So, oh my goodness. Being recognized as Teacher of the Year is a tremendous honor. Before I share my words with you today, I want to share my deep appreciation for the people who help me do my job, the people who get my back and make me look good. We all have those people with us here today, so here are some of mine. I would like to first start off by recognizing and thanking God for the many blessings and for the incredible people He has put in my path. He has given me the strength to get through many trying times in my life. Having faith has kept me grounded and moving forward. I would like to thank all the students and families I have had the opportunity to work with over the years. They have taught me many life lessons, both personally and professionally. I would like to sincerely thank all of my friends and colleagues at Smith. Your support, encouragement, and kindness has been overwhelming and so important to me. As all of you know, an educator's success is shared with many people we work with. And here in West Hartford, I've had the privilege of working with and learning from many exceptional people that range from central office to the custodial staff and everyone in between. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to King Philip Middle School and all the teachers and administrators for their support and patience when I first started back in 2008. Thank you for the confidence you had in me from the beginning. For me, working in a school was a big adjustment, and it was quite a learning curve. To Dr. Gretchen Nelson and the entire Pupil Service Department, thank you for being so supportive and available whenever I have questions or concerns about a student or family. There are many delicate topics that we help students and families face and work through during the school year, and it's reassuring to know all of you are a phone call or email away. A special thank you to Steve O'Brien. I had the opportunity to sit and have a heartfelt conversation with Steve back in June, and he gave me some great pointers on how to prepare for this moment. Thank you. Of course, thanks to my beautiful wife, Flora, who is cheering me on with our children today. Thanks for your unwavering support and for always being there when I need you most. You are an amazing mother and wife, and I'm grateful to have you by my side. To my children, Grace and Cooper, thank you for inspiring me to be a better man. I love seeing your excitement and joy for life. You're terrific kids. I would like to acknowledge and thank my parents and two sisters for their support and love. My parents have sacrificed a lot in their lives so that my sisters and I could have a better life and more opportunities that they had. With that said, I knew as soon as I was selected as Teacher of the Year, I wanted to do something special to honor them. I especially want to recognize my mother and the impact she has had on my life. As I share my story, I hope you will understand why and how it's so connected to what I do as a school social worker, and in many ways, to what we all do as educators. My parents were born in Cuba and came to the United States as young teenagers. It was during a critical time in history when Fidel Castro took over as president, and there was a lot of unrest and unfamiliar territory. My parents' families had to leave so much behind, and they literally came to Miami with only the clothes they were wearing and no money in their pockets. My father, who grew up relatively wealthy in Cuba, told me that as a young teenager, he still remembers the first time he truly felt naked and poor, as many immigrants often do. His father, my grandfather, stayed behind in Cuba, thinking that things would get better and the families would be able to return someday. My dad and his mother were able to eventually leave Cuba. When they first arrived in Miami, they were worried, but happy to be in a safer environment. As they were trying to leave the airport with others in a taxi, they needed to pay for parking. My grandmother, who I never had the chance to meet, graciously offered to pay that parking attendant. So she reached into her bag, but quickly stopped and realized that although she had her purse with her, she didn't have any money in her wallet. Her facial expression and reaction is still rooted in my father's memory. As a teen, my mother was sent to live in Miami with extended family members, as both of her parents didn't leave Cuba until a year or two later. My father and mother met each other as teenagers in Miami High School. I often wonder how they lived when they first arrived in Miami, how scared or unsure they must have felt, how unstable their situation must have been, and what they ultimately witnessed during the takeover of Castro. My father has shared many stories about the experiences, and every time he tells them, I see the pain and anger swell in his eyes about what they did, how they had to leave their country, what they left behind, and the struggle of starting over in a new country. As new students and families arrive at our school's doorstep, it's important to remember how intimidating starting over can be on so many levels. Let me fast forward a bit. Growing up, when it came to our schooling, my parents put a lot of trust in teachers. They didn't have the same level of education, as they primarily went to school in Cuba and Miami. They relied heavily on our teachers to make the best decisions for their children, as so many families often do. In my case, school was never easy for me. You see, I was that child in your classroom who was shy and hesitant. I was that child that took longer to build trust. I was that child that was a struggling learner. I was that child who was born first-generation American. I was that child whose family was bilingual. I was that child whose family moved multiple times. I was that child that experienced trauma. I was that child who doubted himself and his self-worth. I was that child that struggled with anxiety and motor tics. I was that child who needed dedicated, compassionate teachers who would take the time to know me, to see past the challenges, to believe in me. I needed all of you. Let me fast forward a little bit more. I enlisted in the United States Army Reserves at age 18, directly out of high school. For the first time in my young adult life, I was away from my family, alone in a new environment, Fort Bliss, Texas, in the middle of July. The ground was so hot that we were issued black gloves to wear whenever we had to do push-ups or ground detail. Sharing living quarters with 60 other guys wasn't my favorite, but I learned what it meant to depend on others and the true meaning of teamwork and trust. my father shared something important with me before I left for Texas. He said, "A man is only as good as his word. Be respectful, don't be a wise guy, and only respond when talked to." He was right. Basic training was hard, but it wasn't the physical part, rather the mental energy it took to balance everything they required of us. There will be times this year where we will be pushed mentally and physically. I encourage you to think about something that you have endured or maybe are going through at this time in your life, and how that can help give you perspective on whatever challenge you will confront this year. After basic training, I went on to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, where I received medical training as an operating room technician. I later worked in a hospital in Virginia for a period of time. Maybe that's why I get along with our school nurse so well. Eventually, I returned home and enrolled at UConn, where I started my coursework while completing my military duties. I went on to become the first in my family to receive a bachelor's and later my master's degree. I'll fast forward a bit more. I started at KP in 2008. Our daughter Grace was 1 at the time. My mom had recently taken early retirement after working at Aetna for over 30 years as an insurance underwriter and coach. My wife and I were thrilled that she wanted to watch our daughter while we were at work. We were so happy to finally have a similar schedule, as Laura is a school counselor in Farmington. Things fell into place beautifully. We were 3 years into our marriage. We bought our first home. Grace was a joy, and now I had a new job working in a school. Knowing my mom was going to take care of Grace, our most prized possession, gave us peace of mind and a sense of security. All the pieces of our life were in sync. Life was good. My second year at KP was quite different. My wife and I noticed that something wasn't quite right with my mom. We started to see that she was experiencing trouble with simple daily tasks. She was unable to clearly communicate the events of the day, and her writing didn't make much sense. My wife and I would find items misplaced around the house, and on occasions, we would come home and notice that Grace got into things that she shouldn't have. One day, my wife got home before me and found Grace covered in magic marker all over her face and body. But when she asked my mom how it happened, she shrugged and didn't even notice that Grace was covered in ink. On a different occasion, a more serious incident occurred. This time, I got home first, and my mom was in the kitchen doing the dishes while Grace was napping in the other room. After I walked in, I kept hearing a clicking sound, and I couldn't make out what that was for several minutes. I walked around the house to see what it could be, and suddenly realized that the pilot light from our stove was on. After a long emotional day at work, I came home to a situation that, in hindsight, could have been much worse. But in that moment, I lost my cool. I quickly turned off the gas stove and questioned my mom about how long it was on and why she didn't hear the clicking noise. I was demanding and almost harassing her with questions. Then, mid-rant, I paused and realized that my mom was unaware of the risk to her and Grace. So many thoughts ran through my mind. What if I didn't get home when I did? What if my mom had fallen asleep? What if? To say that I lost my patience was an understatement. I made my mom feel terrible, and in return, I felt like the biggest you-know-what. I can see that she started to cry as she kept busy with the dishes, and her voice weakly said, "I'm sorry." I didn't know how to turn it off. In that moment, I realized that something was very wrong and that things would never be the same. My wife and I knew we had to make significant changes. We needed to find someone else to care for Grace, we now also needed to provide additional care and support for my mom. Our entire world was turned upside down. Fortunately, we were approaching Christmas break and would be given a few days to catch our breath and regroup. Don't our school breaks always seem to come up just when we need them? We were again blessed. We found an incredible daycare provider and friend through the Farmington School District. Laura worked with a teacher whose wife provided daycare for teachers' children. She was watching our close friends' children, and in hearing about our situation, Maria McNamara offered to take care of Grace for us. Maria cared for Grace as if she was one of her own children. She later cared for our son as well. The relief and comfort we had having Maria step into this role is truly priceless. Those of you who left your children in someone else's care today know exactly what I'm talking about. As for my mom, we realized we had to step in, find the appropriate doctors and resources to best support her during this difficult and scary time in her life. My siblings and I came together, and for the next several years, we were in and out of doctors' offices. We met with multiple specialists and had several evaluations and medical tests done to try and understand what was going on. We were told with relative certainty that the cause for my mother, age 58, was early onset dementia. We were in shock. We tried to process this while immediately getting her the best possible medical care and support. We explored day programs, visiting nurses, in-home support, counseling, medication, and so on. Nothing could stop this disease. I know many of you have loved ones with Alzheimer's or dementia and can relate. As the years passed, we fought in every way we knew how. Despite our efforts, our beautiful, spirited, playful, and always loving mother's health deteriorated. My wife and I took over all the decision-making for my mother, as she eventually became incapable of communicating her thoughts and wishes. As new parents, learning the ins and outs of parenthood, juggling work, still trying to learn the ropes of working for the school district, and simultaneously taking on the responsibility of becoming my mother's power of attorney, learning about Social Security, Medicare, and how to keep her safe while she battles this awful disease. It was a trying time. And while your story may be different from mine, I know many of you can relate to these times of feeling so stretched, so tired, and so scared. You don't know how you will show up and take care of our students and families, but you do. My mother's diagnosis seeped into every aspect of our life. The stress was palpable. The efforts to manage this disease and support my mom took a toll on everyone in the family. My parents divorced long before any of my mom's symptoms occurred, but nonetheless, I know my father was deeply saddened to see her declining so rapidly. Alzheimer's seems to change a person in every way. It leaves you with the shell of a person you once knew. I realize terrible things happen to good people all the time, but going through this experience over the last 10 years has changed me. My mother has been in stage 3, which is the most advanced stage of Alzheimer's, for more than 2 years now. We have seen her decline and her quality of life diminish in front of our eyes. It has given me a different perspective on many things. I can't help but grieve that my children will never have that special grandparent relationship with my mother. I still remember how excited my mom was when she found out we were expecting a baby. She was jumping up and down and screaming as if she just won the lotto. She was so joyful and proud. It's truly amazing how so many of us show up for our students and families while carrying heavy hearts, grief, and sadness. One of the hardest days of my life was on January 15th, 2015, when we ultimately had to admit my mom to a nursing home. At the time, she was very impacted, but able to still walk with assistance and somewhat aware of her surroundings. When she stepped foot into her new home, she became aggressive for the first time in her life, and she was inconsolable. I still hear her screaming, "No," while she paced the hallways back and forth. The staff was amazing and cooperative and understood what we were going through, but I felt as if I had failed her. We tried so hard for so long to keep her in her home, but even with the round-the-clock care, it became a significant safety issue, and this felt like our only option. I knew this would be my mother's last home. I cried so hard in the car that night. I remember apologizing to her over and over again, asking her for her forgiveness. She was unaware of so much, but I knew she understood what had just happened. Fast forward again. My mother is now 69 years old, unable to communicate, unable to walk or feed herself, dependent on others for everything. Visiting her is difficult for so many reasons, but yet my children will ask, "When can we see Abuela?" When we visit as a family, it's usually brief and simple. We give her a little hug and kiss, and my kids gently push her around the hallways in her wheelchair. Both Grace and Cooper amaze me with their compassion and kindness towards her and towards others who may be struggling. Thank you, Grace, for trying to hug Abuela when she can't hug you back. And Cooper, thank you for tickling her to try and get a reaction out of her. They remind me of so many of our students, full of love, hope, and compassion. It saddens me that my mom cannot celebrate this special time in my life with me. I know she would be proud. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to honor her, share her story, and to celebrate her role in my life. My mom was hardworking, compassionate, loving, and always put her children first. I see parts of her in so many of our hardworking parents at Smith. My life experiences and upbringing have taught me a lot about myself. I am not the smartest person. I have failed more than I have succeeded. I don't always say the right things. I can be slow to complete a task or paperwork. But I am very persistent. I am trustworthy. I am loyal. I am compassionate. I am determined. I am good at building meaningful relationships. Tengo la suerte de hablar español. Mis padres han dado, mis hermanas y yo, una buena vida, y estoy agradecido. My parents have given my sisters and I a good life, and I am grateful. A lot of what I do is who I am as a person, and that is a tribute to my family. As an educator and school social worker, I do my best to not assume or place judgment. I am not here to enable students and families, but instead lend support, intervene when necessary, and try to instill some hope when there is fear or despair. As educators, we have an important role to support the whole child. As we face difficult times in education or in our personal life, my hope is that we dig deep, believe in ourselves and the power that we have to make a difference. As we enter another school year of unforeseen obstacles and complicated issues, let's remember to be there for one another when we are mentally and physically tired. Let's remember to have compassion for our students, the families, and our colleagues, as they may be going through very difficult times. Let's remember to lean on one another, and more importantly, pick each other up when we fall or stumble. I shared the kind of child that I was and some of the obstacles I have faced with you this morning. I am proud to say that I am now that educator that believes in young people and all they have to offer. I am that educator that asks difficult questions. I am that educator that tries to inspire and give hope. I am that educator that will stand by your side when you need someone to lean on. I am that educator that will advocate for students and their families when they don't have a voice, just like my mom lost hers. I believe in all of you as you help teach our students and families so that they have a clear path and bright future, just as my parents and teachers have paved the path for me so that I can travel this special journey. In closing, here is a little preview of my life, my parents, and my journey. I know things can get complicated, but for me it's important to balance a life of simplicity and reflect on who inspires me and the work that I do. A special thanks to Kathy Hardesty for helping me with the slideshow and for surprising me with some added videos from teachers.
We agreed I'm not going to stay there, right? So this has been the most difficult, I don't want to call it speech, talking point I've ever had in putting together. Because what speaks to me doesn't always speak to everybody. And the things that I really like, not everybody else necessarily likes. And my mood often dictates how effective I am at presenting things. And for the past few weeks, I've had to debate if that mood is the appropriate tone to kick off the school year. How inspirational is a swirling tornado of rage? You could ask your administrators, because I met with them last Tuesday, and they got a piece. And I've had this question, but what do I say without lying? I don't want to lie. Actually, I've been lying all morning. To any of you that asked, how was your summer? And I said, oh, it's been really good. Lie. Lie. Miserable. I appreciate the truth tellers. You know, even when they're not saying the direct words that are the truth, but they're giving a kind of tone. And I brought this up before, speaking of Smith School and Lewis, and when I went there to talk about the budget in April, and Teresa saw me, and after I spoke, she said, are you okay? And it wasn't the, hey, are you okay? It was the, should I take you to a hospital now? Kind of, are you okay? That really brings, and so I got back to my office and I said to Rick, how bad do I look? And he was also honest with me. And he was like, oh, you look terrible. So I've decided I can't do that this year. But the past couple of weeks, trying all these ideas swirling. What do I say? How do I do it? And then things happen to build my rage. And I'm telling my wife all about this. And I remembered that my wife doesn't really like angry Tom. Now, it's funny because I do. He's my favorite version of me. That guy gets stuff done. You know, surprisingly, Rosina also likes that Tom very much, which is, she encourages me, so that's a problem. But as I'm putting this together and going through things I've been saying, my wife said to me, that's not your best self. And I said, I don't agree. And she said, no, that's not your best self. People don't want to hear anger. Your best self is when you think of possibilities and you think of who you are. So then I spent time trying to think of who I am. Not to go through a therapy session in front of 800 of you. Who am I? What does it mean to the kids? Where are we now? What do we stand for? What will we do? Where do I find inspiration? Where do I find hope? Where do I find who I am? And a lot of who I am has been true since I was 15. My dad got into a bad work accident, was out of work. And that brings questions about, what are you going to do? Is college going to be realistic financially? And those were times where I was also angry. And we remember the 80s as this kind of golden time of, you know, bad hair, Aquanet, and, you know, the puffy pants. But it wasn't always full of hope. And one thing kept going through my mind, and somebody that often speaks to me, and frankly, those of you that say we should bring in an outside speaker, I'm tired of listening to Tom. So am I. So am I. But I'm not sure if you've heard, we're a little short of cash. So I'm all you got. And the one thing I am not going to do, I kept telling myself, is I am not playing music because I am tired of people asking me, what music are you going to play? I am not going to do that. I just kept telling myself I'm not going to do that. And then I kept thinking, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. What is that thing I'm thinking of from 1985? Why is that? And then I'm like, nope, that's what I've got to do. Scott? That's my favorite song. It's my favorite song, it's my favorite performance, and it's because of something I'm not sure you would have caught. It's a different version than what you'd hear in schools. And it included lyrics that some people have actually questioned, are they part of the lyrics? Woody Guthrie wrote that in 1940. Put it away. Wasn't published till 1944. But there is a part that we don't sing that he did there on September 30th, 1985. Some of you weren't born yet. One Sunday morning, in the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw the people, and they were hungry, and they were wondering if this land was made for you and me. We shouldn't have to wonder if this land was made for you and me. The reason this song spoke to me, that I felt like, okay, I don't want to be trite, I don't ever want to do the same things, it's because I watched footage from Charlottesville. And people can talk, people can be mad at me and say I shouldn't equivocate budget uncertainty with Charlottesville, neo-Nazism, white supremacy. They don't know what we know. Because if you watched on Vice News the clips from Charlottesville, the part that got to me the most, and believe me, it could be anything, but by torchlight, marching, chanting, "Whose streets? Our streets," angrily, on Thomas Jefferson's campus, where Rick Ledwith's daughter is today, Emily Ledwith, somebody who we should all be proud that we've had a part in getting to know a fine, not just young student, but a wonderful young person that West Hartford sends forth. And there are people daring to say these are their streets. People that represent hate. And it's not their streets. This land is our land. The question of is it? The answer is yes. But the Beatles were wrong. All you need isn't love. Love's nice. I'm in favor of it. But education's it. Education's it. And there are kids here that need us. We know that. We know the reasons. I talk about safety and security and how important that is. And you can't think of anything else if you don't know where your meal's coming from. I want you to remember that every time you're going on a vacation and you're excited, be it a break, be it summer. I want you to remember that when we're excited on those rare, rare, rare mornings when Andy Morrow calls you. And why are they rare? Because I know there's kids that day that are not food secure. I know that we have kids that their hope, their family, their life, their love is inside those school doors. And that is so not fair that they have that. It is so not fair that the Friday before vacation, When you and so many others are so excited about vacation, they're dreading it and hoping to get back. Those kids deserve the best of us. They require the best of us. And then there are kids whose security has been twisted, who have been taught to blame others. We've been exposed to them in our lives, and that's what kept speaking to me in Charlottesville. I'll be damned if I'm going to see one of my kids there. And I always think of the same person. I had a student who was brilliant. Brilliant. Read his writings in AP European history. It became clear to me something wasn't right. He'd been taught to hate. That came through in his take on things continuously in European history. And then I met his parents, and I understood why. Because that's what they had taught him, that's what they believed. Because a dirty little secret is that we're a large community. We have all sorts of people here. And we have parents that teach hate to their children, which makes our responsibility greater. I went home constantly thinking about, what am I going to do about this student? Do I pull him aside? Do I talk to him? Do I convince him? Do I shake him? And I decided I was going to teach him that year, the readings I gave, the debates we had, were a basic battle for his soul. Changed plans. I used to take kids to Europe. That year we went to Dachau. In something that will shock most of you, after the AP exam, I showed a movie. Because yes, I hate movies. Mr. Death, about a Holocaust denier, to show the folly. And the fact is, I'm 99% sure it worked. But I can't see into his heart. I can't see into his soul. But that's the battle that we have every day. That's the battle that you have, and I don't know who you're fighting for. You've got to meet the families, you've got to meet the kids. But it's why we can't settle. It's why we can't be depressed. Because it's too easy to be depressed. Because something else happened today, 54 years ago today, on a hot day. The I Have a Dream speech. Martin Luther King Jr. My favorite line from that speech that I think perfectly speaks to us at this point in our history is, let us not wallow in the valley of despair. We can't do that. We cannot do that. Our kids can't afford for us to let a budget battle depress us, no matter how maddening it could be. We can't, I can't lead, because you're all leaders. You're all leaders. You have a more direct impact than I can ever have. The one question that really gets to me, that I still don't know the answer of, and every summer I think about it, would I have bigger impact teaching 100 kids? Is that what I should be doing? I'm sticking with this for now. Because I believe the time is right. But you got to lead those kids. You got to lead those kids with hope. Now, I say clear paths, bright futures, no limits. And we've talked a lot about clear paths and how you have to clear the path, that it's a verb. We don't talk enough about bright futures. I mean, there is no night so dark that it can defeat the sunrise. There is no moment so depressing that you can't lead the way towards hope. I, you, all of us have to be peddlers of hope. But we've got to walk the walk and talk the talk. Can't make excuses. We've got to be honest with ourselves about who are we not reaching yet, and how do we reach them. Now, I told the principals one thing that has to happen. This is something not everybody likes to hear. We get letters about what teacher kids don't want to have, what teacher families don't want to have. I've asked the question, do they know? Do they know? Have we had that conversation? Because we have to. Because you need to know if what you're doing is working. That means you've got to look at the evidence that comes across. You've got to look at what your kids are producing. And we can't be people that place blame. We have to be peddlers of hope. We have to believe that tomorrow it can get better. We have to believe the impossible is possible. Because the fact is, it's never too late. It's never too late. There is always hope. And kids can't lose hope. And the way kids lose hope in themselves and faith in themselves is when they sense that we don't believe in them, or that we think it's too late. Being around high school most of my life, that's when people will say, oh, if we could have gotten to them sooner. But then I hear too many stories of people that have dropped out and then found their moment in life. So it's not too late. If you don't believe me, the Patriots were losing 28-3. It was impossible. 0.4% chance of winning. That had happened. A team had been down that much. In the record of teams down 25 points. In that point in the third quarter or more, they had won previously 4 times and lost 2,544 times. But it was possible. Greatness made it possible. Greatness made it possible. Are you great? Are you great enough to make it possible? Am I great enough to make my job possible? What I know is good enough isn't going to cut it now. I know good enough is absolutely not good enough anymore. I know that we had parent after parent after parent and kid after kid after kid coming forward to defend and celebrate our work last spring. It was as inspired as I've ever been. And one of the things I think that was bothering me this summer, that I wasn't ready to face, but now I'm good with it, is I don't want to let all those people down. Don't make them liars. That's yours, that's mine, that's our responsibility. This town, I believe, when push comes to shove, will always stand for education. I believe in our parents. I believe in the democratic with a small d process. I believe that people will come out and support the hope for their kids. We got to keep giving them that reason to. We've all got to look at ourselves and say, are we good enough or are we great? Because it's time for greatness. Woody Guthrie wrote that in 1940. 1939, largest rally up to that point at Madison Square Garden. 22,000 people came out to Madison Square Garden. It was the German-American Bund meeting, also known as the American Nazi Party meeting. 22,000 people, the largest gathering at Madison Square Garden up to that point in its history. That woke people up. That woke people up. I believe in the goodness of humanity. I believe Charlottesville is waking people up. I believe that the budget crisis is waking people up to decide what's most important to us and what kind of a society will we be. You can judge the justice of a society by how it takes care of those that are least fortunate. And we need to keep pushing that point forward too, because we have kids that are being left behind by cuts to DDS and DCF that need us to stand up for them also, and not just for education. And I know money's tight. And I know people worry. I've got a son entering his senior year and a daughter entering her junior year, going off to college, and they talk about where they'll go and is there a future in Connecticut. There is a future in Connecticut. There's a future in Connecticut because of you, because of the material we get to work with our kids, and those kids that we are most afraid that are going down the wrong path, they're the ones that will make your life worthwhile. Springsteen, introducing that, said, "With countries as it is with people, it's easy to let the best of yourself slip away. It's easy if we don't work to let the best of ourselves slip away." You became a teacher, a social worker, a counselor, a principal, an assistant principal for a reason. Think about why. Think about why. I've said to people, this is my tombstone job. This is it. This is what goes on my tombstone. The most important thing to me is being a good dad and husband. And then it's this. Most people out there won't get to experience me as a father and husband, to much of your pleasure, I'm sure. I'm really lovely at home. But this is your tombstone job too. The words on your tombstone are your kids that go forward. I am more committed than ever to my job. I am more committed than ever to this town. It's just changed. I thought that my job was going to be to elevate West Hartford, both in what we do and in publicity, so that we were recognized as the greatest district in the United States and in the state of Connecticut. That I was going to do this and get others to recognize that. That's what I've realized over the past week as I've been thinking about this. I've been doing what I always say not to do. I've been looking for hope from others and recognition from others. I'm not doing that. I don't need other people to tell us what we are. We're going to tell them. If nobody else will come forward to talk about the budget, we will. If nobody will come forward to talk about how we need to support our kids, we will. West Hartford will lead. This country mimics America. We have everything. We have millionaires. We have homeless children. We have children that run the gamut of experiences that need us more than ever, and we will lead. And you will lead. And we will be that example for this state of how things should be done. We will be the example for this country about how we can get along. 70 different home languages spoken. The kids don't know it. They think it's cool. It is cool. My son went to kindergarten practice when he was starting school. My son had severe life-threatening allergies. The teacher told us that, well, we're not going to change what we do on Fridays because it wouldn't be fair to the other kids. So we're still going to cook with peanut butter. And the principal backed them. And then he had to do his practice bus run. And they were saying, you can't go on the bus with any toys whatsoever. And Jack had this plastic, I thought it was his yellow circle, but it was his dinosaur. And I remember my wife saying, and this was after the whole peanut thing, Well, he can't bring that with him. And Jack was nervous, and he's holding it tightly. And I said, he's taking that, and I can't say what else I said. They can come remove me from the bus. And when they said, we're not going to do something special for your son, that's when we moved to West Hartford. 1 week later, bought my house. 1 week later. My son's a senior now. Those of you that know him and my daughter, they're the people out there that I think let people know he must not be that bad. But why? Because people here have taken care of him. People here have acknowledged he's special. People have acknowledged my daughter's special without the same things. And it is absolutely not because I'm superintendent. I know that because some of you speak clearly about your frustration with me in front of them, not realizing. And no, I hear about it. My kids deserve special treatment. Every parent that sends their kids here deserves special treatment. And now is the time for us to lead and show people that we will treat them specially. We will treat them as our own children. We will make sure they're never a marcher in Charlottesville, whatever takes its place. Things that should be in the dustbin of history that are now on the news, those won't be our kids. Because we're going to provide hope. You can do it. Bright futures. Bright futures. Be proud of that tombstone. Make it huge with all the kids that you've helped, with all the kids that you've saved. Because I don't get to do that with kids every day. But my job is to make sure I give you the opportunity to. And I promise you, we, everybody on the executive team, all your principals, we're going to work hard to do it. Look honestly at yourself. Make sure you know who you are. Make sure you know what you stand for. And make sure you're as committed to the kids of West Hartford on Wednesday, that first day of school, as you were the first day you went into a classroom. I hope you're nervous. I hope you're excited. I hope you understand that this is their greatest day because they get to come with you. And remember that parent that I've talked about before, because there's a parent out there who has a child who could be entering pre-K or entering kindergarten. And that child has some form of a developmental disability. And that parent has spent their time, just as I did with Jack, trying to make sure that that child knew they were perfect. And that parent is bringing their child to school on Wednesday. And they know, now that they're releasing that child into the world, there are going to be others that tell that child he or she is not perfect. Make them perfect. Make them believe they're perfect. Reward the faith that those parents put in us. Let them know you think they're perfect no matter their flaws. Stand up for those kids. Stand up for West Hartford. Stand up for our country. Make sure everyone knows that this land is all of our land. And give hope to that promise so that the answer to that question is always yes. It's our land. It's our town. It's our country. The time is now for you to be great. Thank you so much. Have a great start to the year.